She didn't cry when the landlord slid the red notice under her door, or when she watered down Noah's bottle for the third night in a row. She cried when a stranger she'd accidentally texted sent her $5,000 in 3 silent seconds. The apartment was dark because darkness was cheaper. The fridge hummed like a tired animal. The single window leaked cold into the kitchenette, and the baby blanket around Mira's shoulders smelled faintly of detergent she could no longer afford. Noah fussed on the mattress, mouth rooting, the kind of hunger cry that came from a place too deep to bargain with. She'd meant to text her brother, one more humiliating plea for $50, just enough to get through to Friday. Her thumb had moved quicker than her fear. One digit off. Send. The reply came while she was still rehearsing the apology she'd offer her brother when he inevitably groaned. "I think you meant to send that to someone else." The words pulsed on her cracked screen. Her stomach pitched. She tapped out a flurry of mortified backpedaling. "Sorry, wrong number. Please ignore." She locked the phone like she could lock the moment away and pulled the blanket tighter, rocking with the rhythm of the crying she refused to join. The phone buzzed again. "Is your baby going to be okay?" Who asked that? Not "are you scamming me?" or "lose my number," but a clean, careful question that stepped around shame like it knew the shape of it. Mira stared. Her pride flared and sputtered. "We'll manage," she typed. "Sorry again." She put the phone down, then picked it up, then put it down again like it was hot. Another buzz. "I can help. No strings." She scoffed aloud because she needed the sound to keep from falling. "Thanks, but I don't take money from strangers." Her thumb hovered. She wanted to add any more and didn't. "Smart policy," the stranger wrote. "I'm Jackson now." Not a stranger. The name read like a door without a handle. She didn't answer. The room smelled of dust and baby skin. Noah's cries collapsed into small, angry breaths. She swayed and hummed something her mother used to sing without remembering the words. It had been months since she'd believed in epilogues. Every day felt like another footnote to a long list of things she couldn't fix. Her phone buzzed again. Just take care of Noah. The name, Noah. She hadn't typed it. The realization flickered like a fuse, almost catching. She told herself she must have, somewhere in that panicked blur to her brother. But the wrong number chain was its own little island. Emotion and logic wrestled while she scrolled. No, she hadn't. The unease was a thin wire in her chest. Still, there was the newborn fact of the day, $5,000. She opened the payment app because not looking wouldn't make it less real. The numbers sat there calmly, commas like handrails. She tapped the screen twice to make sure it wasn't an old balance resurrected by hope. "This is too much," she typed finally. "I only needed $50. It's already yours. No catch. One less thing to worry about." Explanations stacked in her head. Scam, pity, trap. But nothing fit the shape of how ordinary his words felt. She put the phone on the counter, stared at the empty tin of formula, and chased breath back into her lungs. The night felt suddenly crowded, like every version of herself, student, lab tech, ex, mother, had filled the room to watch what she would do. She bought formula at 24-hour prices that might as well have been gold. Noah drank like the body remembers before the mind does, fierce and relieved, his lashes webbed with tears. Mira's hands shook as she held the bottle. When he finally sagged into the soft, heavy sleep of a full belly, she sat on the edge of the mattress and scrolled back to the message with Noah's name. Held there and let the unease and gratitude braid themselves into something she didn't have a word for. She typed and deleted variations of thank you until what remained was spare and true. "You didn't have to do that." A long pause separated them like a hallway. "I know I didn't," came the reply. "I wanted to." She slept in fits, one ear tuned to Noah's breathing, one finger curved around the phone. When dawn nudged gray through the window, a knock startled the room into attention. Nobody knocked here. The landlord texted. The neighbors yelled through walls. Mira froze. Noah didn't stir. The knock came again, polite, like it had been trained somewhere with carpet. She cracked the door chain. A delivery guy stood balancing a dolly stacked with boxes. "Delivery for Mira Jensen?" She nodded because making a sound felt like committing to something too big to take back. She signed with a pen that said a bank's name she'd never qualified for. 4 boxes swallowed the living room. She opened them one by one on the floor like she was diffusing something dangerous. Formula, the good kind, the brand she'd always walked past. Diapers in sizes that anticipated a boy growing. Wipes, bottles, a soft blanket with little stitched foxes, puree pouches lined up like a parade. At the bottom of the last box, a small envelope. No letterhead, no flourish. He should have what he needs. Noah deserves better than barely getting by. Jackson. Her name didn't appear anywhere, but the message met her in the exact coordinates of her life. She sat back on her heels and let the tears happen the way rain does when a cloud can't hold itself up anymore. There was too much tenderness in the thoughtfulness. Blackout curtains folded tight, a bottle brush, a onesie with tiny astronauts. It was like someone had looked directly at the negative space of her days and filled it. Suspicion lived beside gratitude because they were cousins, not enemies. People didn't do this without a camera, a catch, a cost. And yet here were boxes and a line drawn as clearly as if it had been written on the air. No strings. That word again. She tried to picture the man who could order a kindness this precise at this speed. The name was heavy in her mouth even when she didn't say it. Jackson. She texted because silence had begun to feel like a debt. The boxes arrived. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just take care of Noah. In that message was an authority she couldn't map. It wasn't the voice of someone playing a role. It was the voice of someone who had made choices like this before and survived whatever they cost. She tied up the empty box flaps and stacked them by the door for recycling she rarely remembered to drag downstairs. Noah woke, hummed the sound he made when the world returned to him, and she kissed the place where his hair swirled at the crown. We're okay, she whispered into that fragile whirl. We're okay today. By mid-morning, sunlight haloed the cheap curtains into something prettier than they deserved to be. Mira brewed coffee by counting spoonfuls because the scoop had disappeared during one of the moves you make when life keeps shrinking around you. She sat on the linoleum with her back to the lower cabinet, the mug warming both hands, and watched Noah fall asleep again, full and soft. A fist hung open like he'd decided to trust gravity for once. The brain that had lain dormant under survival began to stir. She thought about the labs where she'd worked, about the cleanliness of a new test plate and the velocity of a centrifuge, and the gleam of possibility when numbers lined up under your hands. She thought about the string of jobs after, temporary contracts, side hustles that ate dignity for breakfast. She thought about the slow ways hope erodes. Then she looked at the boxes, at the quiet, at the man on the other end of a message thread whose last words were not a demand, but a directive to care. She opened the chat again, typed, deleted, typed. Why are you doing this? Really? The bubbles appeared and disappeared like breathing. Because once upon a time someone did it for me when I couldn't ask, he wrote, and because no child should feel that kind of hunger. The answer arrived without ornament. It landed as heavily and simply as a hand on a shoulder. She stared at it until the words pressed through whatever hard things she'd built around herself to stay up. She typed, I want to pay you back. It felt important to erect that tiny scaffolding around her dignity while it was still new enough to wobble. For the formula? For the kindness? He asked. For not ignoring me, she wrote, I'll figure it out. The little houseplants on her windowsill had died and come back enough times to know that figuring it out was a season, not an event. Tell me what kind of formula Noah needs, came the reply. I'll send more. Not money, supplies. Only if it's really no strings, she typed. I don't do strings, he wrote. Strings are for people playing games. She smiled despite herself at the odd elegance of that. She sent the brand and the ounces and the little details only parents memorized. The nipple flow that worked, the bottle type that didn't. It felt like writing a prescription for the life she wanted her son to have. The day slid forward. Afternoon stretched thin. She cleaned while the kettle hissed, threw away the expired ketchup packets that had become wall decor in the door of the fridge, folded the 2 good towels into tighter versions of themselves. The knock earlier had rearranged something in the room. Even the air looked different. She checked her account because disbelief is a habit that lingers. The money was still there. patient and unblinking. She put her phone on the sill to charge and watched sunlight creep across the floor, bright footstep by footstep. She thought that if you told the version of her from 2 nights ago that all of this lived inside a wrong number, that version would have laughed until she coughed. She picked up the phone to take a photo of Noah sleeping with the fox blanket tucked up to his ear, and the camera caught the boxes in the background, like proof she could scroll back to if the day decided to deny itself. Next to the photo app, the browser icon sat like a dare. She didn't press it. She wouldn't Google him, not yet. She wanted to live inside this one clean corridor where gratitude didn't have to fight with context. She texted instead, "He's sleeping now. Full. Thank you." A pause, then. "Good. That's how babies should sleep." She was still smiling when a small chill walked the line of her spine. It wasn't the draft under the door. It was the echo of earlier. Just take care of Noah. She had never typed his name. She scrolled the thread again, as if the letters might magically appear where they hadn't been. The unease grew teeth. Maybe she had mentioned Noah in that first message to her brother, the one that had never found him. She checked. The original plea lived in her send folder like a bruise. "Ben, I'm sorry to bother you again. I need $50 for formula." Noah's almost out. She'd written his name there. Of course she had. But she hadn't sent that to the stranger. Her heart climbed into her throat, not with fear exactly, but with the sense of a story widening around her. The world beyond the door felt closer, listening. The phone buzzed. "Get some rest," Jackson wrote. "You'll need your strength. Tomorrow's going to be better than today." It was a kindness and a prediction and a promise laid on the same line. She stared at the name, at the door without a handle, and realized that whether she opened it or not, it was already opening toward her. By morning, the wrong number had a gravity of its own, pulling other choices into its orbit. I made coffee, not because I could afford to waste grounds, but because the ritual steadied my hands. Noah woke smiling, the fox blanket scrunched under his chin like a trophy. The boxes in the corner felt like a dream that had decided to stay. I could have let the day pass inside that small miracle. But curiosity is a cousin to caution, and both were wide awake. I opened the browser and typed Jackson with the kind of reluctance usually reserved for opening bills. The suggestions sharpened it for me. Jackson Albright. One tap and a different altitude swallowed the screen. Articles, panel photos, headlines that spoke in a dialect I hadn't used in years. Helix Core Industries, AI diagnostics, proprietary patents, valuation. In one image, he walked out of a Senate hearing, jaw set, eyes narrowed against whatever waited outside the frame. Another photo caught him mid-interview, though the caption said he rarely gave them. Widowed, no children, media shy. I scrolled until the language went from glossy to granular, feature pieces that tried and failed to extract a life from a man who kept it armored. The number on the page may as well have been its own weather system, $11.8 billion. My thumb hovered above the phone like I was balancing on something high with no rail. I looked at Noah, busy trying to gum a teething ring into submission, and whispered the number out loud. It sounded ridiculous in the air of our apartment, like saying a mountain out loud in a room with no window. I slid back into the message thread and typed before I could talk myself out of it. "Are you the Helix Core Jackson?" The dots appeared, blinked out, appeared again. "Yes," he wrote, "but that's not the useful part of me today." I stared at that line until it softened. "Why me?" I asked. "Why answer at all?" A longer pause. "Because people helped me when no one had a reason to," he replied. "Because I know what it's like to watch someone you love need something you can't give fast enough. Because I can." I thought of the boxes, the precise, unfussy kindness of them. The way he had said, "Take care of Noah," like a promise he expected me to keep. I typed, "I'm not a charity case." "I know," he said. "I read your message like a lab report. You were asking for exactly what you needed. That's rare and useful." "Useful how?" I wrote, suspicious despite the strange warmth creeping in. "Do you work?" he asked. The question hit a place I kept covered. "I did," I wrote, biochem diagnostics, interned at Novagan, took contract work after the shutdowns. Then daycare closed. Then my car went away. Then, you know the rest. I do, he wrote. Show me your mind tomorrow. Not a test, a conversation. Come to Helix Core at 11. Ask for Ava. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because a sound had to break the surface. I don't have a suit, I said. We don't manufacture those, he replied. Wear what lets you breathe. Noah yelped in triumph at the teething ring. I pressed my lips to his hair and tried to imagine my body in a room like that again. Glass and quiet, and the click of elevator doors opening at floors I never had the badge for. The thought made my stomach tilt and then steady. Is this a job interview? I asked. This is an invitation to stop drowning while you're still strong enough to swim, he wrote. If you don't like the water when you see it, you leave. No story, no debt. The messages looked clinical, but something in their arrangement made room for breath. He wasn't performing goodness. He wasn't asking me to perform gratefulness back. He was building a narrow bridge and telling me to walk it or not, my choice. I dressed with the care of someone who knows fabric can be a translation. Clean jeans, blouse that still forgave me for pregnancy, the blazer I'd kept for no good reason other than Faith has a closet too. When I caught my reflection by accident in the microwave door, I saw someone who had been carrying too many bags for too long and had finally decided to set a few down. I used the carrier because strollers don't read as welcome everywhere. Noah settled against my chest, all heat and contentment, and we stepped into the wind that runs like a rumor down downtown streets. Buses hissed. A cyclist swore at a taxi. Above all of it, the towers studied their reflections in each other like they were judging the city for trying. Helix Core didn't look like the caricature in my head. Instead of marble and mirrors, it was clean lines, patient light, quiet. The receptionist looked up and knew my name before I said it. 37th floor, she said, pressing a visitor badge into my palm like it had always been mine. Ava will meet you at the elevator. The ride up felt like a controlled fall. Floors stacked themselves in numbers that used to mean something. I watched our faint reflection in the glass as the car climbed. My mouth set, Noah's cheek smooshed against my collarbone. When the doors whispered open, a woman was already waiting there. Late 40s, sleek hair, the kind of calm that means the building reports to you even if your title says something else. Mira, she said, offering her hand in a way that respected the fact that one of mine was currently busy with a baby. I'm Ava Lynn, Mr. Albright's chief of staff. He's in a meeting, but he asked me to show you around. Ava led us through a corridor where glass and steel had decided to be kind to each other. Her shoes didn't make noise on the floor. I'm not sure what this is, I admitted, my voice too loud to my ears and all that quiet. I keep expecting a punchline. Mr. Albright doesn't do punchlines, she said mildly. He does precision. She stopped at a door and keyed it open. He also does this. It wasn't a conference room. It was a nursery, crib, changing table, soft rug that understood knees, a basket of toys that had been chosen, not thrown in, blackout curtains with tiebacks that wouldn't pinch little fingers. I put a hand over my mouth before I could stop it. He thought it might make it easier for you to visit, Ava said, or work, or breathe. I couldn't get the sentence to sit up straight. Pays attention, she finished. Coffee? I nodded. Sitting felt like a ceremony I had to perform carefully, so I lowered myself into a chair and watched Noah toddle his gaze across the room like he had been hired to evaluate it. He knocked his heel against the rug and approved. Ava returned with coffee and a calm that did not need to be narrated. Tell me about you, she said, not like a form to fill, but a path to walk. I told her the shape of my work life before the world shook. Lab benches and sample trays, and the quiet glee of graphs that match predictions. The 6-month contract that came with a lanyard I saved too long. The daycare that closed with a single email. The car that left without a goodbye. The kitchen where I learned the exact ratio of water to formula you can add before the lie becomes cruel. I didn't tell her about the nights I counted quarters. I didn't have to. Women like Ava can read the margins. Before I could finish apologizing for talking too much about the wrong parts, the door opened again. He looked like the photos and nothing like them. Taller and more tired, expensive, and somehow not performative. He crossed the room with the posture of someone accustomed to being discussed and uninterested in hearing the discussion summarized. "Mira," he said, simple as a clock. "Thank you for coming." I stood because my body remembered to. I wasn't sure if I should. "You came anyway," he said. "That's data." He glanced past me to Noah, who blinked up at him with the fearless assessment infants reserved for strangers and stars. "Hey," he added quietly, and the voice he used was not the Senate hearing one from the photo. It was the one you use when you've been taught to ask permission to approach a small sovereign. We sat. The table between us was clean wood, not glass, like someone had decided to absorb sound instead of bouncing it back. "Before anything else," he said, "you owe me nothing. This isn't a test, and I'm not interested in charity. I believe in investing in people who know what to do with being invested in." "Why me?" I asked, because the question wasn't trying to be brave. It was trying to be accurate. "Because you didn't ask for a rescue," he said. "You asked for enough to keep your son fed and said you'd pay it back, which told me you wanted a path, not an exit. People like that build things. Sometimes people like that drown anyway," I said. He didn't flinch. "Sometimes, but it helps when someone hands them a better map." He slid a thin folder across the table. 3-month engagement," he said. "Audit support inside finance. Flexible hours. Remote or on-site. Pay is commensurate with competence, not mercy. If you hate it after a week, walk. No explanations required." I opened the folder and inhaled in a way that made the room tilt slightly. The number wasn't obscene. It was respectful. It said, "You're not temporary to me." The title wasn't puffed. It was clean. The responsibilities read like someone had written down the things that make me feel most like myself and arranged them into bullet points. "And the nursery?" I asked, because pretending not to notice it would have been rude to my own heartbeat. He gave the smallest smile, like the idea of those blackout curtains pleased him. "Also real," he said. Ava's phone lit up with a message, which she glanced at and then ignored. The power move of someone who trusts her own triage. "You don't have to answer today," she said to me. "We didn't put a clock on this." I looked at Noah, who had discovered a soft cube with holes designed to receive shapes and was currently trying to post the circle through the triangle opening with the optimism of an entire generation. I looked at the folder. I looked at the man who had turned a wrong number into a hallway with doors on both sides. "Okay," I said, before fear could draft a speech. "I'll try." Jackson nodded, not triumphant, just settled. "Good," he said. "Start when it makes sense. Tomorrow if you want. Wear what lets you breathe." "Is there anything I should know?" I asked, closing the folder like I was securing something alive inside it. He paused, and for the first time a weather pattern moved across his face that didn't belong to the building. "Only this," he said. "A lot of people here are excellent at what they do. Some of them are excellent at hiding what they do." I waited, but he didn't elaborate. It wasn't a riddle. It was a preface. As we stood, Noah deployed 4 babbled syllables that somehow contained an opinion. Jackson startled into a laugh, quick and rare. "He's direct," he said. "He takes after his mother," Ava replied, which I decided counted as a reference, not a compliment, and therefore was safe to accept. Back in the elevator, I held the folder too tightly. The numbers on the panel counted backwards to a place where the air was warmer and the lights cheaper. On the sidewalk, the city resumed its noise, oblivious to a single woman whose velocity had shifted by a few degrees. On the way home, I texted him without ceremony. "I'll be there at 9. I don't like first days that wait." The dots appeared. "I know," he wrote. "Ask for Ava, bring Noah, we'll be ready." I put the phone in my pocket like it was evidence of an improved hypothesis and walked faster. The carrier warm, the folder a hard reassurance against my palm, the word ready rearranging the furniture in my chest. By the second morning at Helix Core, the rhythm of the place had started to hum under Mira's skin. The building breathed in patterns, lights that dimmed and brightened on a schedule too subtle to notice. The quiet click of doors that opened only when you belonged. She didn't, not yet, but pretending she did was half the job. She arrived early, earlier than anyone expected. The receptionist looked up. startled but impressed, and waved her toward the elevator. Noah was half asleep in his sling, clutching the ear of a plush fox. Mira carried her coffee-like armor and told herself she wasn't nervous. The lie worked until the elevator chimed on the 37th floor, and the doors opened to silence so polished it made her shoes sound loud. Ava appeared moments later, holding 2 mugs. "You're punctual," she said, a small smile softening the professionalism in her voice. "Single moms don't have the luxury of late," Mira replied. Ava handed her a mug. "I like you already." They passed the glass nursery first. Noah's space, her space, looked impossibly calm. Someone had already set up a small playmat and sanitized bottles. Mira laid him down gently, brushing her fingers across his hair before stepping back into her office. She could see him through the glass partition, safe and dreaming, while she took her seat before 2 pristine monitors that glowed with potential. It felt foreign and familiar all at once, like walking back into a life she used to know. Rows of spreadsheets and database entries stared back at her, sterile and waiting. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before muscle memory took over. Data doesn't care about your rent, it just wants to be solved. By the second hour, she was gone, vanished into the math. She spotted patterns, deviations, inconsistencies in vendor invoices that didn't add up. A name repeated more often than chance would allow, payments small enough to dodge attention, but large enough to form a pattern. She flagged them mentally, unsure what to do yet. When she leaned back, stretching, she caught movement outside the glass wall. Jackson stood there. He wasn't in a suit today. The sharpness of the billionaire from Google Images had been replaced by rolled sleeves and tired eyes. Still, he looked out of place in a world of normal men. He gestured toward the door. "May I?" "It's your company," she said, trying not to sound startled. "It's our office," he corrected. "At least for now." He glanced past her to Noah, who stirred softly, and then to her monitor. "Settling in?" "I haven't broken anything yet," she said. "Give it time," he murmured, stepping closer to look at her screen. "You're in the reconciliations folder already." She nodded. "Q3. Vendor payouts. A few don't match the project records." His brows lifted slightly. "You found that already?" "They're not well hidden," she said. "Whoever did this wanted to look invisible, not clever." He stared at the numbers, then at her. "Anything feel off to you?" "I've only been in the system an hour," she said slowly. "But yes, either someone's rounding in ways that make no sense, or someone's hiding something in the noise." Jackson's expression didn't change, but the air in the room did. "You don't have to dig deep yet. Stay surface level." Mira shook her head. "I don't do surface level." He smiled faintly. "Neither do I." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Keep this between us for now. If you find something that doesn't look right, bring it directly to me. No one else, not even Ava." Her heartbeat stumbled. "You expect me to find something?" "I expect you to see things others won't." When he was gone, Mira stared at the closed door for a long time. The hum of the office returned, but the room felt different, denser. She looked back at the screen, at the columns of numbers that suddenly seemed more dangerous than abstract. She could feel the edges of something large and hidden shifting under the surface. By noon, Ava brought her lunch, a plate she hadn't ordered. Perfectly timed, perfectly portioned. "You'll forget to eat," Ava said. "Everyone here does." "Does he?" Mira asked before she could stop herself. Ava's mouth tilted in a small, secret smile. "Jackson? He forgets on purpose." When Ava left, Mira stared at the food but didn't touch it. Her mind had gone back to the numbers. They formed patterns in her head like constellations connecting themselves. Trinox Solutions LLC. The name kept repeating, always under the internal audit threshold, always under different departments, always processed. She opened another database tab, searching for its registration. Nothing. No physical address, no vendor profile. Just a tax ID number routed through a third-party holding firm in Delaware. Her stomach turned. That wasn't laziness. That was precision. She copied the entries into a private folder, encrypted them, and added notes. Cross-check vendor payments with department codes, verify project allocations. Look for pattern continuity. At 3:06 p.m., a message popped up in her internal inbox from J. Albright subject. "Keep this off email. Meet me before you leave. Jay. Her pulse quickened. He hadn't said if she found something. He'd said when. That confidence unnerved her. By the time she walked into his office, the sun had already begun to slide behind the city. The windows cast long bars of gold across the floor. Jackson sat behind a desk too clean to be normal, flipping through reports without really reading them. When she handed him the flash drive, he didn't hesitate. You found something, he said flatly, like confirming a hypothesis. Not proof, she said, but enough to make you ask questions. He plugged the drive in. Lines of data filled the screen. She watched his face as he scrolled. The small changes, tightened jaw, narrowed eyes, were more telling than words. You pulled this from Q3? He asked. Yes, but it goes back further. The vendor doesn't exist. The payments are routed through a shell company in Delaware. He exhaled sharply through his nose. You're right. It's clean. Too clean. Whoever did this knows the system, probably helped design it. You already suspected something, she said quietly. He didn't deny it. I've been watching drift in our financials for a year, but no one else saw it. Too subtle, too small to trigger alarms. So why not bring in an external auditor? I don't know who I can trust, he said simply. That landed harder than she expected. Mira understood that kind of isolation, when everyone around you looks like an ally until the lights go out. So what do you want me to do? Keep going, he said, quietly. If anyone asks, you're reconciling back-end billing. She hesitated. You're asking me to investigate your own company. I'm asking you to find the truth. She met his eyes. And if it's ugly? He didn't blink. Then we deal with it. There was a long silence, the kind that builds a bridge instead of breaking one. Finally, Mira nodded. All right, but I'll need higher access. Done, he said without hesitation. And Mira, she paused at the door. Don't let anyone know I'm helping you. Her breath hitched. You think they're watching? I know they are. That night, she sat on her apartment floor with the laptop open, Noah asleep beside her. The city hummed outside, indifferent. She stared at the Helix Core login portal, her access newly expanded, and thought about how strange it was that trust could be given so quietly, like sliding a key across a table. She thought of Jackson's voice, calm and unflinching. I believe in investing in people, and for the first time in a long time, she realized someone had actually done it. When she finally closed the laptop, she looked down at Noah, his tiny hand curled in sleep, and whispered, We're not drowning anymore, kid. We're swimming straight into something bigger. She didn't know yet if it was rescue or danger, only that she was done floating. By the third week, Helix Core's systems felt like a city map Mira had memorized in the dark. She knew which avenues were clogged at quarter close, which alleyways the procurement logs liked to hide in, which lights in the compliance dashboard were performative and which were useful. What she didn't know yet was who kept slipping through the gaps like water. The name still threaded everything. Trinox Solutions, LLC. Small payments scattered like sand. $240 here, $2,308 there. Always just beneath the thresholds that wake auditors up. Different departments, different approvers, the same routing signature, a shell address in Delaware. When she cross-checked tax IDs through a public registry at her kitchen table at midnight, she got the corporate equivalent of a shrug. Mailbox, agent of record, no humans attached. Clean, precise. She stopped thinking of it as a mistake. It was a machine. Noah was content in the nursery that morning, belly full, a plastic ring anchored between determined gums. Through the glass, his little hand pinwheeled while she leaned closer to her screen. She layered logs, matched timestamps, and then, there, a sliver. The approvals came from different user accounts, but every single one shared the same device ID at the moment of authorization. Ghost credentials. Someone was borrowing real people's keys to unlock a door they never knew they opened. Mira's scalp prickled. She copied the pattern into her private folder, encrypted everything twice, and sat back, staring at her reflection haloed faintly in the monitor. Someone inside wasn't merely clever. They were intimate with Helix's nervous system. They designed their theft to look like maintenance. A soft knock. She looked up to find Ava in the doorway, carrying a plate and a look that read, You forgot to eat again. Grilled chicken, Roasted vegetables. Coffee, Ava said, setting them down with the practiced elegance of a person who triaged crises and calories for a living. You're very quiet today. Quiet means I'm thinking, Mira said. Loud means? Run. Ava's smile flickered. Noted. She hesitated. If you need a second set of eyes? I can't loop you in yet, Mira said, hating the way the words felt. They tasted like disloyalty when what she meant was protection. Ava absorbed it without flinching. Then pretend I didn't offer, she said gently, and left. At 9:06 a.m., Jackson stepped in without knocking. Sleeves rolled, tie crooked like he'd argued with it, and lost. He took in the double monitors, the private folder icon, the way Mira's shoulders were already braced. Talk to me. Ghost approvals, she said. Different users, same device signature. The payments wrote to Trinox, then through a blind holding agent. It's deliberate, controlled, and it's been running for at least 3 quarters. He didn't sit. He read the lines on her screen like they were a diagnosis he'd rehearsed receiving. You're sure? I'm sure enough to be scared, she said. This isn't someone testing the fence. This is someone who built it. Jackson's jaw worked once. Keep it on your machine. No backups to the network. And if anyone asks, you're still reconciling back-end billing. Someone is going to ask, she said. They always do when you're looking at something you shouldn't see. Jackson's mouth did something that almost qualified as a smile. Then tell them you prefer surface level. I don't do surface, she said. Good, he replied. Neither does what you're chasing. When he left, she opened the HR permissions log for the first time. People's names were stories. Access told you what a story thought it was entitled to. She didn't expect to find a neon sign pointing toward a villain. She found something better, an email chain buried under an innocuous subject, prep for external evaluation, where a chief of staff in finance requested temporary override access to procurement and vendor master files for streamlining. The date matched the first Trinox payment. She printed the chain and stared at the signature block. Vincent Harmon, Chief Financial Officer. The name carried a smoothness on paper. In person, she'd only seen him at a distance. Navy suits, a controlled smile, the drag of eyes that skimmed people for usefulness. Mira picked up the phone and messaged one word to Jackson. 5. They hadn't discussed code, but the number worked like a flare. 5 minutes later, his office door clicked shut behind her. The room was all understatement. Bare desk, muted art, floor-to-ceiling glass softened by half-drawn blinds that sliced the skyline into measured rectangles. He took the pages without greeting, read fast, and then read again slower. You already suspected him, she said when the silence got heavy enough to register as a third person in the room. Jackson didn't bother to waste a lie. I suspected the department. Vincent came in 2 years ago with a mandate to remake our internal controls. He did. People applauded the efficiency. I hated the blind spots. Why not remove him the second your stomach turned? She asked. Because suspicion isn't evidence, he said, not looking up. Because he's popular with the board. Because if I make a move without a noose and a signed confession, I look like a billionaire protecting his toys. Is the board clean? She asked it the way you ask if a floorboard will hold your weight. 2 are compromised, he said. At least. They've already swatted down one internal review I tried to push through. If I shove again, they'll call a vote and drag the company through a spectacle. And if you wait, Mira said, then the machine keeps running while we argue about optics. They stared at each other across the quiet desk. The city breathed through the blinds. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang once and stopped. Then we don't wait, she said. He nodded once, slow. No, we don't. He opened a drawer and slid a folder toward her. She recognized the careful weight of it before she touched it. A curated dossier. Vincent's CV, truncated old press clippings about streamlining compliance, internal memos heavy on euphemism, org charts that showed how a man could thread his own authority through critical arteries and call it heart health. He's good at this, Mira said, flipping a page. Too good. Vince is a weather system, Jackson said. If you don't read it early, your house is gone. Before you know, you should board the windows. Why keep him then? Because the people who write weather reports sat on his board. There was no bitterness in the line, only fact honed into a tool. Mira traced a finger down the org chart. mapping deputies and dotted line reports, noting who owed their promotions to Vincent's reshuffle. If he's using ghost credentials, he has an accomplice with admin access, she said. Maybe more than one. You can't extend privileges like this without a hand inside HR or InfoSec. Jackson folded his hands. HR is clean. How do you know, she said, a small, tired tilt of his head toward the hallway. Because Ava would have told me if it wasn't. Mira didn't ask how he was so certain. Trust, here, looked like a lattice you built one calm, competent act at a time. She exhaled. Then InfoSec. Jackson considered that and didn't disagree. You said keep this off the network, she said. But if we're going to prove it, we'll need access to back-end logs most people don't even know exist. Endpoint telemetry, SSO token trails, device fingerprinting. You can have it, he said, as long as it doesn't announce itself. Ghost work, she said. Ghost catching, he corrected. When she turned to leave, he said her name, and she stopped. This gets loud before it gets quiet, he said. If he senses pressure, he won't just cover his tracks, he'll make us the story. Then we give him a better headline, she said, and left before she could fall in love with the way the corner of his mouth almost lifted at that. The work changed shape. She stopped chasing invoices and started chasing shadows. Endpoint IDs, token reuse, odd login vectors at odd hours from the same physical device behind different usernames. She found a pattern tucked inside the pattern. Authorizations often happen within 7 minutes of a calendar entry labeled vaguely, ops sync, budget stand-up, board prep, as if proximity to legitimate work could lend legitimacy to theft. She followed the trail to the door of a suite she'd never been inside. Finance. Carpet thicker, air more temperature-controlled, as if the numbers were shy. She stood in the doorway of a glass-walled office and watched Vincent for a full minute. He moved like he expected air to part for him. He laughed a little too formally. He shook hands with palms just dry enough to signal superiority. He didn't look like a thief. That was the point. Back at her desk, she found an internal message she wasn't supposed to see. A junior analyst emailing Vincent's assistant for emergency override access per CFO request. The timestamp matched a Trinox transfer. She screenshotted, encrypted, printed, and slid the paper under the blotter in Jackson's office with a sticky note that read, "Simply borrowed keys." Hours passed. Noah slept, woke, declared war on a stacking toy, and slept again. Mira's shoulders burned, but she didn't stop. When she finally went home, the city's lights had decided to be kind, turning every pothole into a puddle of glitter. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay on the safe side of exhaustion, while the ceiling learned her worry by heart. She wasn't afraid of losing her job. There were always more jobs if you didn't care what they did to your inside voice. She was afraid of being turned into a story she didn't recognize. Single mom weaponized by billionaire to settle a score. She could see the headline already, felt the algorithm taste it. Her phone buzzed at 12:14 a.m. Jackson, still awake? Mira, obviously. Jackson, we're close, but he'll hit first if he thinks we're moving. Mira, then don't think, move. There was a pause long enough to register a decision. Jackson, tomorrow 10 a.m. I'm calling him in. You'll monitor the feed from upstairs. Do not come down. Her hands went cold. Mira, he'll go for you personally. Jackson, he already has. We're done pretending to be surprised. She placed the phone face down and watched her heart knock at the cage of her ribs. She thought of the early message he'd sent. You owe me nothing, and understood it differently now. He wasn't rescuing her. He had invited her into a fight he'd been losing alone. In the morning, she arrived earlier than early. She checked the nursery twice, like ritual could be armor. She asked Ava for access to the internal conference room feed, and Ava, without asking why, handed it over with a look that said, I know, without traitorously saying, I know. At exactly 10 a.m., Vincent walked into a room with windows and no hiding places. Jackson was already seated, the conference table between them, an operating table for truth. Mira leaned closer to her monitor as the meeting began, the device ID patterns still bright in her mind. The paper under Jackson's blotter, the emails that said nothing at all, and everything if you could read sideways. Voices lowered. poses arranged. Courtesy performed like a ritual no one believed in anymore. When Vincent reached into his jacket and set a flash drive between them like a challenge coin, Mira's stomach dropped. Whatever was on it, it wasn't kindness. And when his mouth curved and he said the board had concerns, she understood the weather system had shifted from storm watch to landfall. She didn't look away. She had done the math. Now the rest of the equation would show its teeth. You're giving feedback on a new version of ChatGPT. Which response do you prefer? Responses may take a moment to load. ChatGPT response 1. ChatGPT response 2. The building felt different the morning everything went loud, like the air had been calibrated a few degrees sharper, like decisions could cut if you weren't careful where you put your hands. Mira checked the nursery twice before she sat down. Noah babbled at the window, fox blanket draped over one shoulder like a cape. On her second monitor, the internal conference feed waited, a rectangular, quiet, polished table gleaming like a warning. At 9:01 a.m., Vincent walked in. He moved the way people move when they believe the world owes them compliance. Measured steps, chin lifted just enough. Jackson was already seated at the far end, sleeves rolled, expression flat. No handlers, no attorneys, no witnesses except the cameras, the glass, and Mira on the floor above, a ghost with a login. She didn't need audio to hear the tone. It was in their shoulders, in the posture of the table itself. Vincent was talking with his hands like a man conducting a familiar symphony. Jackson didn't hand him a melody to play with. He let silence do the work. The flash drive appeared again, set on the table between them like a game piece. Vincent leaned in, speaking softly, an actor turning his face to the good side of the room. Jackson didn't touch the drive. He spoke 2 sentences, short, precise, and leaned back. Vincent's mouth tightened. The choreography shifted. Ava stepped into the frame like an understudy who'd been rehearsing for years. Calm, precise, a folder under one arm, a phone in the other. She said something and gestured to the door. For a heartbeat, Vincent didn't move. Then he did, and the camera caught the way his jaw set when 2 security officers stepped just inside the threshold and waited without speaking. His badge is already dead, Mira whispered to no one. Vincent said something like a curse disguised as a compliment. Then he left. Mira didn't exhale until the feed returned to an empty room, the long table bright under office light, holding the shape of the argument like heat in metal. Her phone pinged. Keller. Delivery confirmed. State AG acknowledged receipt. Federal liaison looped. Another message stacked under it. Ava. Board emergency session in 20. Keep your head down. He might try something petty on the way out. Petty turned out to be predictable. A burst of emails from burner domains accusing her of falsifying logs, threatening to tell the truth about her past, which, to the extent that it existed in public, was a collection of non-sensations, contracts, terminations that were just restructurings wearing meaner shoes, a car repossessed by simple math. Keller flagged the messages, routed them to legal, and blocked the domains with the bored efficiency of a surgeon removing lint from a wound. The press didn't wait for official statements. They flowed toward noise like water toward a slope. Blogs posted headlines that escalated by the hour. Helix Core CFO under investigation for irregularities, internal whistleblower triggers, audit of executive vendor stream sources, ghost credentials used in multi-quarter siphoning scheme. They didn't use her name. They didn't have to. Mira read the words with a strange detachment, like the story had finally crystallized into the version the world could hold without dropping it. At 10:14 a.m., Ava appeared at the door of Mira's office in person, which she never did when something could be said in 3 words of text. She leaned against the frame, eyes steady. "It's done," she said. "Suspended?" Mira asked. "Effective immediately," Ava replied. "Board voted unanimously. Keller's packet did what it was built to do. Security walked him to the elevator. He didn't shout. He saved it for the parking garage." Mira didn't know whether to sit or run. She settled for standing, embracing her hands on the desk like it might try to lift off. "What about the board members he compromised?" she asked. "2 of them recused under counsel's advice," Ava said. "The others are suddenly very enthusiastic about controls." A hint of wryness touched her mouth. Sunlight does that. How's Jackson? Exhausted, contained. Ava's eyes softened. He said to tell you, take the day. Keller wants a debrief at 3. After that, disappear for 24 hours. Can I see him? You can, Ava said, but he'll tell you the same thing I am. Rest now so you don't fall over later. They stood together for a small, human moment, two women poised at the edge of a cliff that had already fallen. From the nursery, Noah chirped something that sounded suspiciously like an opinion on the corporate governance. Mira laughed, and the sound startled her. It came from a place unbruised. By noon, Helix Corp's official press release had been updated. Helix Corp announces, suspension of Chief Financial Officer pending investigation. The company has engaged an external forensic team and is cooperating with state and federal authorities. Preliminary findings indicate misuse of vendor approvals and unauthorized credential activity. It was clinical and clean and the exact right amount of cold. Keller sent a summary deck for the board. 4 slides, no decoration, timeline, mechanism, evidence, remediation. It read like a scalpel's itinerary. She pinged Mira privately. Elegant work. You saw the pattern nobody else wanted to see. Then, because Keller didn't do sentiment without purpose, be careful. He'll try to make you a symbol. Refuse the role unless you choose it. At 2:15, Mira finally let herself into Jackson's office. The blinds were half closed, as if the room had decided on its own to take a breath. He was at the table, not the desk, sleeves still rolled, tie abandoned to some other surface. Up close, the line of fatigue across his face looked less like defeat and more like a ledger finally balancing. Congratulations, she said, and then winced at how wrong that word was for a day like this. He shook his head. Not yet, but thank you. They sat with the kind of quiet that respects the shape of the other person's day. When he spoke, his voice had sand in it. You were right, he said, about not letting him set the story. Keller says their office barely had to push. The data pushed for us. Mira thought of the logs, the device IDs, the way the ghost approvals lined up like beads on a string. Data wants to be true, she said. It's people who try to make it pretty. A corner of his mouth tilted at that. The board asked me how we missed it, he said. I told them we designed a system with too few mirrors and too many curtains. And now? Mirrors, he said simply. He gestured at the chair opposite. A folder sat there, closed. Mira looked at it and then at him. He tipped his head toward it. Open it. Inside, a single page on Helix letterhead. Not a statement, not a security protocol, an offer. She looked up fast. He held up a hand. Read it later, he said gently. Don't make a decision today. Your brain is still full of adrenaline. What is this? She asked anyway, because the question needed to exist in the air. Future, he said, if you want it. The urge to say yes rose and then flattened. She closed the folder carefully, palms on the cover like it might slip away if she didn't pin it to the table. There's still the noise, she said. Vincent won't go quietly. He already filed something else, Jackson said. A public statement through a friendly outlet. Reframed everything as a power struggle. He positions himself as a reformer punished for efficiency. Classic, Mira said. He's trying to become the protagonist of his own consequences. We'll answer, Jackson said, with facts, not theater. He rubbed a thumb along the edge of the table as if smoothing a splinter. But for today, let it be loud. The truth can handle it. She stood. Anything you need from me before Keller's debrief? He looked at her then, really looked, past the day and through it. You to go home, he said. Sleep. Hold your kid. Remember what this was for. On her way out, Ava caught her in the hall, pressed a card into her hand. Private number, no name. If you need a shadow route in and out of the building, she said, use this. Reporters are sniffing. I'm not the story, Mira said, reflex more than conviction. Ava's smile was not unkind. You will be if you choose to be, or if you're careless. I'm not careless. I know, Ava said. It's one of your better qualities. The safe house felt less like exile and more like a borrowed moment when she unlocked the door that afternoon. She set Noah down, watched him army crawl to the toy basket like a mission was underway. The television was a parade of panels discussing fiduciary duties with the certainty of people who had Googled the term 15 minutes earlier. She turned the volume down and let the crawl of captions do the work. Her phone buzzed with messages she didn't know anyone. Journalists, influencers, distant acquaintances who suddenly remembered shared classes. She silenced them all and answered only Keller. Keller. Board accepted remediation plan. Council coordinating with AG. You did good. 2 minutes later, a new thread. Jackson, you okay? Mira. Tired. Okay. You? Jackson. Tired. Also okay. Take tomorrow off, please. Mira. Bossy. Jackson. Accurate. She grinned despite the weight behind her eyes. Night brought a different kind of noise. Think pieces about corporate governance, about women in whistleblowing roles, about the mystery mother whose pattern recognition had saved billions in value. They sketched her silhouette from shadows and got most of it wrong. She turned the TV off. When the apartment finally fell quiet, she sat on the edge of the couch and watched Noah sleep, the soft surrender of his breath a kind of benediction. In the dimness, the day rearranged itself into a sequence she could name, a wrong number, a name in a text, boxes on a floor, a nursery behind glass, patterns, proof. A man escorted to an elevator with his badge already dead. And here, her son's hand lacks on a fox's tail, the future on the table in a folder with her name spelled correctly at the top. She rested her forearms on her knees and bowed her head. Not in prayer, in acknowledgement. She hadn't asked for rescue. She'd asked for $50. The universe had answered with a map, then handed her a pen and said, draw the rest. Tomorrow would be for choices. Tonight could just be for the knowledge that she had refused to drown. The following week unfolded like an echo, loud, then fading, then suddenly intimate again. Helix Core was still a battlefield in recovery, but the explosions had moved off stage. The CFO's office was sealed, its glass walls emptied of art and arrogance. Keller's final report sat on the company intranet, time-stamped and signed by 3 separate agencies. The words criminal proceedings pending glimmered in every headline. For the first time in months, Mira's mornings were still. She woke to the smell of coffee, not panic, to Noah's babbling, not sirens of worry. The safe house had become a home by accident. She worked remotely that week, monitoring data transfers for Keller's team and reviewing Helix's new internal control policies. Policies that existed because she had seen what happened when they didn't. When Jackson called her that Friday morning, his voice carried something she hadn't heard before. Relief. Come in, he said simply. Bring Noah. The office didn't feel like Helix anymore. There were new security badges, a new rhythm in the halls. The hush that used to smell of fear now smelled of rebuilding. Ava met her in the lobby. He's upstairs, she said, smiling. Board meeting just ended. I think you'll like this part. When Mira stepped onto the 37th floor, Jackson was waiting near the conference windows, the skyline fanning out behind him. He turned at the sound of Noah's squeal. Hey, little man, he said softly, crouching down so Noah could tug his sleeve. You look taller already. 6 new teeth, Mira said, smiling. That explains the bite marks on your reports, he said dryly, and they both laughed. It felt strange, normalcy in a place that had nearly devoured them. He gestured toward the table. A folder lay open in front of him. The board accepted Keller's recommendations, he said, and they agreed to a full internal overhaul, new audit division, new compliance chain. We need someone to lead it. She blinked. You mean? I mean you, he said. Director of Internal Integrity, reports directly to me, full autonomy. Mira stared at him. You want me to stay? I want you to build the part of this company that should have existed from the start, he said, the one that listens when people whisper that something's wrong. She swallowed hard. And the optics? The press? They'll think. They already think, he interrupted. Let them. They'll get bored. I'm not hiring optics. I'm hiring competence. A beat of silence passed. And what if I say no? He smiled faintly. Then I'll thank you, wire you your bonus, and spend the next 6 months regretting that you walked out the door. Mira laughed, the sound shaky and genuine. You rehearsed that. 3 times, he admitted. She looked out at the skyline. The city below shimmered, unapologetically alive. I'll take it, she said finally, but I'm doing it my way. Good, he said. That's the only way it'll work. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork and signatures. Ava assembled a team around her, half new hires, half veterans who'd survived the purge. Keller flew in for one last debrief, shook Mira's hand and said, "Don't let the system get comfortable again." Then she was gone, leaving only a file of encrypted contacts and a post-it note that read, "If it gets quiet, worry." But the quiet that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of secrets. It was space, room to breathe, to rebuild. Late one evening, Mira walked past the glass nursery Helix had built for her. The lights were dim now, the toys neatly stacked. Noah was too young to remember the battles fought around his nap schedule, but she did. The glass wall had been both a barrier and a promise. She touched her hand to it once, then turned toward her office. Jackson stood there, leaning in the doorway. He looked lighter, though the world still clung to him. "You never stop," he said. "Neither do you," she replied. "I tried," he said with a small grin. "Didn't stick." He stepped closer. "You know, it's strange. The first night you texted me, I was 2 minutes away from deleting that number. I thought it was another scam." She arched an eyebrow. "You're saying my desperation had bad marketing?" "Terrible," he said, laughing. "But the truth? I hadn't spoken to anyone outside work in weeks. Your message, it was chaos, and I think I needed chaos that wasn't my own for once." She looked down, then back at him. "And now?" "Now," he said, "I'm grateful for every wrong digit." They stood in silence for a long moment. Outside, the city burned gold against dusk. "I never said thank you," she whispered. "You already did," he said. "You rebuilt what I almost lost." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe we both did." That weekend, Mira took Noah to the park. The world felt different when you weren't running from it. She spread a blanket under a tree and watched him chase after a plastic plane another child had thrown. It was absurd, ordinary, perfect. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jackson. "Jay, we just posted the official statement. Vincent's arrest warrant went public. Also, board approved your budget for the integrity division. Congratulations, Director Jensen." She texted back. "Make sure the headline doesn't say, 'Single Mom Saves Billionaire.'" His reply came instantly. "Already vetoed." She chuckled, slid the phone into her bag, and closed her eyes against the sunlight. For months she had lived in motion. Fight, survive, prove. Now for the first time she allowed stillness. The wind moved through the trees, Noah's laughter cut through the noise of traffic, and somewhere in that sound, she found peace. When she returned home that night, a message waited on her personal email. No sender name, just a subject line. "For the one who saw what others ignored." She opened it. "Justice isn't loud, Mira. It's patient. You did good." Keller attached was a photo, a shot of Helix's press conference. Jackson at the podium, Ava to his left, the new leadership team behind them. Mira smiled at the image, then closed the laptop. She carried Noah to bed, humming softly, and paused by the window. The city lights blinked like distant signals, 1,000 little proofs that life went on. She thought about the night she'd sent that wrong text, about how humiliation had turned into hope, and how hope had turned into a work that mattered. Maybe that was all redemption ever was. Not grand gestures, just ordinary people refusing to stay silent. Downstairs, her phone buzzed one last time. A new message from Jackson. "Look outside." She frowned, pulled back the curtain. Parked by the curb was his car. He stood beside it, holding something. A small envelope. When he saw her, he lifted it slightly, half smile forming. Curiosity carried her downstairs. He handed her the envelope without a word. Inside was a photo, grainy, black and white. The first text she had ever sent him printed across the bottom. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I just need $50 for baby formula. Please, I'll pay it back." Beneath it, written in his handwriting, "You already did." Mira's throat tightened. She looked up at him. "Why keep it?" she asked. "Because it reminded me that not every mistake is a bad one," he said. The night air was cool. Somewhere far off, the city hummed like a giant heart. Come inside, she said softly. No laptops, no board meetings, just dinner. He smiled. You're the boss now. Don't you forget it, she said. And as the door closed behind them, the world outside kept spinning, louder, kinder, infinitely alive. Because a wrong number had become a beginning, and beginnings, she had learned, were worth answering.